Commander Gina stared at the flickering display on her ship's communication console. The distress beacon had been transmitting for 6 hours now, its weak signal barely cutting through the cosmic interference that surrounded Kepler-4 for 2b. She adjusted her uniform and walked toward the bridge, her boots clicking against the metal floor of the starship Meridian. "Captain, we're receiving that human distress signal again," reported her navigation officer, a tall Valerie with silver skin and 4 arms. "But I must remind you, the Galactic Council classified this planet as a death world 3 years ago. No species has ever survived more than 48 hours on its surface." Gina nodded, remembering the reports. Kepler-4 for 2b was a nightmare world where acid storms raged for weeks. Temperatures swung from freezing to boiling within hours, and the atmosphere contained enough toxic compounds to kill most known life forms in minutes. The Council had sent 3 different species to attempt colonization. All had failed within days. "Sir, we're getting close enough for visual contact," announced her pilot, Tekka. The young officer's tentacles danced across the controls as she maneuvered the ship through the planet's chaotic magnetic field. The viewscreen activated, showing a swirling mass of purple and green clouds wrapped around a dark planet. Lightning flickered constantly through the atmosphere like angry spirits. Gina had seen death worlds before, but this one looked particularly Tekka pointed with one of her tentacles. "I'm detecting structures on the surface. They appear to be ... intact." Gina leaned forward in her chair. Through breaks in the storm clouds, she could see buildings that seemed to bend and sway with the wind rather than resist it. Gardens of some kind dotted the landscape, their plants somehow thriving in conditions that should have killed them instantly. "This is impossible," muttered the science officer, checking his readings 3 times. "My scanners show human life signs. Multiple humans. They're not just alive. They active." The distress beacon suddenly changed its tone, becoming a standard docking request. A calm human voice crackled through the speakers with a slight accent that Gina recognized as Korean. "Council ship Meridian, this is Dr. Kwon of Research Station Alpha. We see you up there. Would you like to come down for some tea? The weather's actually pretty nice today." Gina's crew exchanged confused glances. Nice weather. The ship's sensors showed surface winds of over 200 kilometers per hour and acid rain that could melt through most metals. "Dr. Kwon, this is Commander Gina of the Galactic Council. We received your distress signal. What is your status?" she replied, trying to keep the amazement out of her voice. A laugh came through the speakers. "Oh, that old thing. Sorry, we've been meaning to turn it off. We were having some trouble with our power grid 3 years ago, but we sorted it out. Everything's working fine now. Better than fine, actually." The ship's scanners confirmed what Gina was hearing. The human settlement wasn't just surviving, it was expanding. New buildings were under construction, and energy readings showed their power output had increased by 300% since the last council survey. "Permission to land?" Dr. Kwon asked cheerfully. "I'd love to show you what we've been working on. Hannah, our chief engineer, has developed some fascinating adaptations to standard terraforming equipment. And Minho's been growing the most incredible vegetables in our hydroponic domes." Gina made her decision. "Tekka, take us down, but keep the shields at maximum and be ready for emergency ascent." The descent through Kepler-4 for 2b's atmosphere was unlike anything Gina had experienced. The ship bucked and rolled as it fought through layers of superheated gases and electromagnetic storms. Warning alarms blared constantly, and even their military-grade shielding began to show stress fractures. Just as Gina was about to order an abort, they broke through the lowest cloud layer. The landing pad that appeared below them was clearly human-built, but it incorporated design elements she'd never seen before. Flexible materials that bent with the wind, surfaces that seemed to channel the acidic rain into collection systems, and energy collectors that turned the constant lightning strikes into power. As the Meridian touched down, Gina watched through the viewscreen as a figure emerged from the main building. Dr. Kwon was a middle-aged human wearing what appeared to be standard colonist gear, but modified with additional filters and protective elements. He walked across the landing pad as casually as if he were strolling through a peaceful garden, completely unbothered by the toxic rain and hurricane-force winds. The airlock cycled and Dr. Kwon stepped aboard with a warm smile. He pulled off his breathing mask and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Welcome to our little corner of paradise," he said, his eyes twinkling with genuine enthusiasm. "I know it doesn't look like much from orbit, but once you understand how this planet works, it's actually quite beautiful." We've learned that sometimes the best way to survive isn't to fight against nature, but to dance with it. Dr. Quan led Commander Gina through the colony's main entrance, where she immediately noticed something strange. The doorway wasn't rigid like typical galactic standard construction. Instead, it seemed to breathe with the building, expanding and contracting slightly as the wind pressure changed outside. Commander Gina, meet Hannah, our chief engineer, Dr. Quan said, gesturing to a woman in her 30s who was adjusting some kind of flexible joint in the wall. And this is Minho, our head botanist. Hannah wiped her hands on a cloth and smiled. Welcome to our home. I hope the landing wasn't too rough. The atmospheric currents can be tricky if you're not used to them. Gina's translator struggled with some of the technical terms as Hannah explained their building techniques. The walls contained a network of pressure sensors and adaptive materials that responded to seismic activity in real time. When the ground shook, which happened several times per day, the buildings would actually sway and bend rather than crack. The Zephyrians tried to build rigid structures here, Minho explained as they walked down a corridor that curved gently, left and right. Their cities lasted about 6 hours before the first major earthquake. The Crystalline Empire's approach was even worse. They tried to anchor everything to bedrock, but this planet's crust shifts too much. As they moved deeper into the settlement, Gina began to understand the genius of human adaptation. Every system served multiple purposes. The same tubes that carried fresh air also collected moisture from the atmosphere. The flexible building materials doubled as shock absorbers and energy storage devices. Here's something you'll find interesting, Hannah said, stopping at a large window. Outside, Gina could see what looked like a garden, but the plants were unlike anything in the Galactic Botanical Database. Minho's eyes lit up as he opened the door to the growing area. We started with standard earth crops, but they couldn't handle the soil chemistry here. So we began experimenting with genetic adaptation. Not engineering, mind you, just encouraging natural mutations that helped the plants survive. The garden was incredible. Purple tomatoes grew in spiral patterns around support poles that swayed with the wind. Leafy vegetables with metallic sheens seemed to actually absorb the acidic rain and convert it into nutrients. Most amazing of all, the entire garden was housed in what Gina recognized as converted atmospheric processors. Those machines were supposed to transform the air composition, she said, pointing at the humming devices integrated into the garden structure. Right, but that would take centuries and use enormous amounts of energy, Hannah replied. Instead, we modified them to create Each section of the garden has slightly different atmospheric conditions, so we can grow different types of food. Some plants actually prefer the natural atmosphere here. They walked past a section where strange blue fruits hung from vines that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent light. Minho picked one and offered it to Gina. Try it. The natural compounds in these fruits help humans process the local atmosphere more efficiently. We've been eating them for 2 years now, and our lung capacity has actually improved. Gina politely declined, not sure what the fruit might do to her Valerie physiology, but she was fascinated by the implications. The humans weren't just surviving here, they were evolving. Their tour continued to the power generation facility, where Gina witnessed something that challenged everything she knew about energy systems. Instead of trying to create stable, controlled power like every other galactic species, the humans had built collectors that harvested the planet's chaotic energy patterns. Lightning strikes this area about 40 times per hour, Hannah explained, watching as another bolt illuminated the collection array. Instead of trying to prevent it, we built a system that captures and stores the energy. The seismic activity actually helps too. Every earthquake generates power through our foundation systems. The most impressive part was a massive turbine system that looked like it was dancing with the wind rather than fighting it. The blades were flexible and seemed to change shape based on wind conditions, sometimes spinning slowly, sometimes rapidly, but always generating power. The Council's engineering handbook says this is impossible, Gina admitted. Unstable power sources can't support a permanent settlement. Hannah laughed. That's because most species try to make everything predictable and controlled. We learn to build systems that work with unpredictability. Our power grid actually gets more efficient during storms because we have more energy sources to draw from. As they climbed to an observation deck, Gina got her first full view of the human settlement. It sprawled across the landscape like a living organism, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being imposed upon it. Transport tubes connected different sections, but they followed the natural contours of the terrain instead of straight lines. The hegemony tried to terraform a world similar to this one, Gina said, remembering the report. They spent 50 years and billions of credits trying to change the planet's weather patterns. The project failed completely. That's the difference, Minho said, joining them on the observation deck. They tried to make the planet more like their homeworld. We decided to make ourselves more like the planet. A gentle tremor shook the building, and Gina instinctively grabbed the railing. But Hannah and Minho barely noticed as the structure swayed smoothly with the seismic motion. How did you figure all this out? Gina asked. Hannah looked out at their impossible settlement and smiled. We learned to bend instead of break. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the nervous energy of 100 different species. Commander Gina stood at the central podium, her report glowing. On the massive holographic displays that surrounded the circular chamber, representatives from across the galaxy shifted in their specialized seating, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. Honored delegates, Gina began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I present evidence that challenges our fundamental understanding of planetary colonization. The Valari delegate, Ambassador Vex, raised two of his 4 arms in dismissal before Gina could continue. His silver skin gleamed under the chamber's lights as he spoke in his melodic language. Commander, with respect, your report describes impossible achievements. No species has ever successfully colonized a Class X death world. The atmospheric toxins alone would kill any known life form within hours. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The massive crystalline representative, whose body resembled living diamond, chimed in with sounds like breaking glass. The Valari speak truth. Our people attempted colonization of similar worlds. All perished, despite our superior mineral-based biology. Gina activated the holographic recordings from her visit. Images of the human settlement appeared in 3-dimensional detail above the assembly floor. The delegates watched in stunned silence as the footage showed humans walking casually through acid storms, tending gardens in toxic soil, and operating machinery that bent and swayed with seismic activity. These images are fabricated, declared the Thrixian representative, his insectoid form clicking aggressively. His compound eyes reflected the holographic light as he stood on his 6 legs. No primitive species could achieve such adaptation. They must be using forbidden genetic manipulation technology, possibly even temporal manipulation devices. The accusation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Forbidden technology was a serious charge that could result in planetary quarantine, or worse. Council leader Nala, an ancient being whose energy-based form flickered with authority, spoke with a voice that resonated through every translator in the chamber. These are grave accusations, Representative Crix. Do you have evidence to support claims of illegal technology use? The Thrixian delegates' antennae twitched nervously. What other explanation exists? The humans have been isolated for only 3 years. Such adaptation requires millions of years of evolution or advanced technological intervention. Dr. Day, the Council's chief xenobiologist, had been studying the biological samples Gina brought back from Kepler-4 for 2b. His laboratory was a marvel of galactic science, filled with analysis equipment from dozens of worlds. As the debate raged in the assembly hall, he made a discovery that would change everything. Impossible, he whispered to his assistant, a young Aquarian whose gill slits fluttered with excitement. Run the analysis again. Check for contamination. The results came back identical. The human tissue samples showed cellular modifications that shouldn't exist. Their respiratory systems had developed additional filtering mechanisms. Their skin had grown thicker and more resistant to acid. Most remarkably, their blood chemistry had changed to process toxins that would be lethal to any other known species. Meanwhile, back in the assembly hall, the debate had grown heated. The hegemony's representative, a towering reptilian being, with scales that shifted color with emotion, slammed his massive fist on his platform. We lost 3,000 colonists attempting to settle world Zerians. The atmospheric conditions were nearly identical to this Kepler-4 for 2b. How dare these humans succeed where we failed? Perhaps, suggested a soft voice from the Peaceful Collective's delegation. We should investigate rather than dismiss. The humans may have developed techniques that could benefit all Council species. This suggestion was met with a chorus of objections. The pride of the galactic community was at stake. If a species as young and technologically limited as humanity could succeed where others had failed, it challenged the very foundation of the Council's hierarchy. Council leader Nayla's energy form pulsed brighter, commanding attention. Enough, commanded Gina. I am authorizing a full investigative delegation to visit this human colony. We will determine the truth of these claims and investigate any potential violations of galactic law. Gina bowed respectfully. I will arrange transport for the delegation immediately, Council Leader. However, I must warn you that the journey to Kepler-4 for 2b is dangerous. The planet's magnetic field interferes with most navigation systems, and the atmospheric entry requires precise timing. As the assembly began selecting delegates for the mission, Dr. Day burst into the chamber with his findings. His excitement was visible even through his thick, fur-like covering. Council Leader, I have urgent biological data that may explain the human success, he announced, his voice cutting through the debates. The chamber fell silent as Dr. Day activated his own holographic display. Cellular structures, DNA sensors, and biochemical processes filled the air above the assembly floor. The humans are not using forbidden technology, he explained, his scientific training keeping his voice steady despite his excitement. They are unconsciously evolving. Their bodies are adapting to the planet's conditions at a rate never before observed in galactic history. The Valerie delegates for arms trembled with disbelief. Evolution does not work that rapidly. This violates every principle of biological science. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dr. Day agreed, but these humans appear to have an unprecedented ability for rapid genetic adaptation. Their cellular structure is remarkably flexible, allowing for modifications that would be impossible in our species. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. If humans could adapt to any environment, they represented either the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat the galaxy had ever encountered. Council Leader Nala's energy form dimmed as she processed this information. The delegation will depart within the standard rotation. We must understand how this is possible. The Council delegation's transport ship struggled through the violent atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Like a metal bird caught in a hurricane, Ambassador Thex gripped his restraints with all four arms as the vessel bucked and rolled through layers of acidic clouds. The crystalline representative's diamond-like body created musical chimes each time the ship lurched, while the massive hegemony delegate's scales had turned deep purple with stress. This is madness. The Thrixian representative clicked through his translator. No rational species would choose to live in these conditions. Through the reinforced viewports, they could see the human colony below, somehow thriving in the midst of what the Council's computers classified as a Category 5 atmospheric disaster. Winds howled at over 300 kilometers per hour, carrying sheets of rain so acidic it could dissolve most known metals. Lightning strikes lit up the sky every few seconds, creating an almost constant display of electrical fury. Dr. Kwan's voice crackled through the communication system, calm and cheerful despite the chaos outside. Welcome back to Kepler-4 for 2b. I hope you brought your weather gear. We're having quite a storm today, even by our standards. The delegation's pilot, a skilled Aquarian whose multiple arms worked frantically at the controls, barely managed to land the ship on the designated pad. The moment they touched down, the vessel began to shake violently from the wind pressure. Environmental suits activated, announced the ship's computer. The delegates sealed themselves into their protective gear, breathing filtered air and relying on energy shields to protect them from the toxic atmosphere. Dr. Kwan met them at the airlock, wearing nothing more than a light jacket and breathing mask. He had to shout to be heard over the howling wind. Sorry about the weather. Storm season just started. Should last about 6 weeks. Ambassador Thex stared in disbelief as Dr. Kwan led them across the landing pad. The humans' casual attitude, in conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes, was unsettling. Through their suit sensors, the delegates could see that the atmospheric toxicity levels were off the charts. Inside the main building, they were greeted by a young human who couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old. Her name was Boa, and she was apparently a meteorology student working on her research project. The storm's going to get worse in about 2 hours, she said casually, checking a device that looked like it was made from scavenged parts. The electromagnetic field is shifting toward a Class 7 pattern. We'll probably get some really spectacular lightning displays. The crystalline delegate's body resonated with confusion. How can you predict weather patterns on a planet with such chaotic atmospheric conditions? Boa's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Oh, that's the cool part. Most species try to analyze weather using visual and atmospheric pressure data, but this planet's weather is actually controlled by electromagnetic patterns deep in the core. You just have to learn to listen to the right frequency. She led them to what appeared to be a simple observation room with large windows facing the storm. The wind outside was so strong that it bent the metal supports of nearby structures, but the human buildings continued to flex and sway without breaking. "See, watch this," Boa said, putting on a pair of modified headphones connected to her improvised device. She closed her eyes and listened for a moment. "There's going to be a major lightning strike, right? There a massive bolt of electricity crashed into the colony's power collectors exactly where she had predicted." The delegates jumped in surprise, but the humans in the room barely reacted. "The planet talks to you if you know how to listen," Boa explained. "The electromagnetic field shifts about 30 seconds before each lightning strike. The seismic activity follows patterns based on solar radiation. Once you understand the rhythm, it's like listening to music." The Thrixian representatives compound, eyes focused on the strange device. "This technology is not in any galactic database." "Where did you acquire it?" "I built it from spare parts," Boa said proudly. "Took me about 6 months to figure out the right frequency modulation. My professor, Dr. Yoon, helped with the mathematical calculations." Suddenly, the building began to shake more violently than before. The delegates' environmental suits activated emergency stabilizers, but the humans continued their conversation as if nothing was happening. "Major seismic event incoming," Boa announced calmly. "This is going to be a big one. Probably magnitude 7.2 or higher." The earthquake hit with tremendous force. The council delegates watched in horror as their transport ship, built with the most advanced galactic engineering, began to buckle under the stress. Emergency alarms blared from their environmental suits as the rigid shelter technology started to fail, but the human buildings around them performed an incredible dance. The structures bent and swayed like trees in the wind, their flexible materials absorbing and redistributing the seismic energy. Power lines stretched and contracted without breaking. Even the windows, made from some kind of adaptive transparent material, flexed with the building's movement. "How is this possible?" Ambassador Vex gasped, watching his people's supposedly superior technology crumble while the human settlement remained intact. Dr. Kwon appeared beside them, completely unfazed by the continuing earthquake. "We learned something important during our first year here. The planet isn't trying to kill us. It's just expressing itself. Once we stopped fighting against it and started working with it, everything became much easier." The hegemony delegates' massive form trembled, though whether from the earthquake or emotion was unclear. "Our engineers spent decades developing rigid construction techniques. They said flexibility was a sign of weakness." "Maybe for some situations," Hannah said, joining the group, "but here rigid things break. Flexible things survive." As the earthquake finally subsided, the delegates looked outside to see their transport ship listing badly to one side, its landing gear damaged and hull plates cracked. Meanwhile, the human colony stood unchanged, its buildings already returning to their normal positions as if nothing had happened. Young Boa checked her device again. "Storm's intensifying. We should probably head to the main shelter until it passes. The electromagnetic readings suggest we're going to get some really interesting weather in the next few hours." The council delegates realized they would be staying much longer than planned. 3 months after the delegation's return, the Grand Assembly Hall looked very different. The same circular chamber that had once buzzed with dismissive murmurs now hummed with nervous energy and reluctant respect. Commander Gina stood at the podium again, but this time she wasn't alone. Dr. Kwon, Hana, and Minho flanked her, their simple human clothing a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and technological enhancements worn by the galactic representatives. Council leader Nala's energy form pulsed with measured authority as she addressed the assembly. "After extensive investigation and direct observation, this council officially recognizes the human colony on Kepler-4 for 2b as a successful permanent settlement. Furthermore, we acknowledge that human adaptive techniques represent a breakthrough in colonization science." The admission sent ripples of uncomfortable shifting through the chamber. Ambassador Vex's forearms remained folded, his silver skin still showing traces of the embarrassment he'd felt when his own species' emergency shelter had failed during the earthquake. "The Council requests human assistance in colonizing 12 worlds that have been classified as uninhabitable," Nala continued. "These planets represent significant strategic and resource value, but all previous attempts at settlement have failed." Dr. Kwon stepped forward, his calm demeanor unchanged by the grandeur of the Galactic Assembly. "We're honored by the Council's request. However, we have conditions." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. No species had ever dictated terms to the Galactic Council. The hegemony representatives' scales flushed red with indignation, while the Thrixian delegates twitched aggressively. Humans must lead all colonization efforts, Dr. Kwon stated simply. We've learned that each planet requires a unique approach. You can't apply the same solution to different worlds. We need complete authority over settlement, planning, construction, methods, and timeline decisions. The crystalline representative's body chimed with disapproval. This is unprecedented. The Council has supervised all major colonization projects for 3,000 years. Hannah spoke up, her engineer's practicality cutting through the political tension. With respect, how many of those projects succeeded on Death Worlds? We've spent 3 years learning how to survive on Kepler 4-4b. That knowledge isn't something you can just copy from a technical manual, Minho added. Each planet is alive in its own way. You have to understand its rhythms, its moods, its needs. That takes time and patience, not just advanced technology. The debate that followed was intense. Some delegates argued that humans were too inexperienced to lead such important projects. Others worried about setting a precedent that might challenge the Council's authority. But the facts were undeniable. Humans had succeeded where everyone else had failed. Young Boa, who had been invited as a technical consultant, stood up from the observer section. May I show you something? She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the assembly hall. 12 different worlds appeared, spinning slowly in the artificial space above the delegates. Each one looked impossibly hostile, one covered in methane storms, another with surface temperatures that could melt most metals, a third with gravity so strong it would crush most known life forms. We've been studying the data from these worlds, Boa explained. Planet Zarian 7, where the hegemony lost 3,000 colonists, has electromagnetic patterns. Similar to Kepler 4-4b, the storm cycles follow predictable patterns if you know what to look for. She gestured to another world, Thanatos Prime, where the crystalline empire's diamond-based structures shattered, has seismic activity that actually creates natural building materials. The earthquakes aren't destroying the planet, they're reshaping it. The assembly watched in fascination as Boa outlined potential solutions for each impossible world. Her youthful enthusiasm was infectious, and even the most skeptical delegates found themselves leaning forward to hear her explanations. The point is, she concluded, these aren't death worlds, they're just different worlds. Once you stop trying to make them like your home world and start understanding what makes them unique, they become opportunities instead of obstacles. Council. Leader Nala's energy form dimmed as she processed the implications. The Council accepts human leadership for these colonization projects. However, we request joint expeditions. Our species can learn from human techniques while contributing our own technological advantages. Dr. Kwon smiled. That sounds like a fair partnership. 6 months later, Commander Gina stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above, Kepler 4-4b, watching the most remarkable sight in galactic history. 12 massive transport ships hung in space, each one carrying 500 human volunteers to worlds that had been written off as uninhabitable. The ships themselves were marvels of adaptive engineering, built using human flexibility principles. Combined with galactic technology, they could reshape their hulls based on the conditions they encountered. The colonists aboard weren't just settlers, they were pioneers, carrying humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the refusal to accept that anything was impossible. It's incredible, said Dr. Day, who had joined Gina to witness the departure. Each ship carries families, children, elderly people. Other species send only their strongest, most expendable members to attempt colonization. Humans bring their entire communities. Gina nodded, remembering her first meeting with Dr. Kwon. They don't see it as a suicide mission, they see it as building new homes. The first ship engaged its engines, heading toward a world where acidic fog had killed every previous expedition within hours. The second ship followed, bound for a planet where the gravity was so intense that most species couldn't even stand upright. One by one, the vessels departed, carrying human hope to the darkest corners of the galaxy. What makes them so different? Dr. Day asked. Gina watched the last ship disappear into hyperspace, carrying human families toward a world of eternal storms and toxic oceans. They don't give up, she said simply. When every other species sees an impossible challenge, humans see an interesting problem to solve. In the months that followed, reports began arriving from the new colonies. The humans on Zarian 7 had learned to harness the methane storms for energy. The settlers on Thanatos Prime were using the activity to forge new building materials. On world after world, the impossible was becoming routine. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was showing everyone that the universe was much more welcoming than they had ever imagined. Sometimes the greatest strength wasn't superior technology or ancient wisdom. Sometimes it was simply the determination to find a way forward, no matter how difficult the path might seem. The end.